Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations. Second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy Makara, author and entrepreneur, and each week I talk to men and women who have lived through turning points and come out brighter on the other side. Whether this is the first time you've listened to this podcast or you're a regular listener, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit follow or subscribe. Today, I'm talking to Baiju Solanki. Baiju is a psychologist, entrepreneur, and leadership expert who helps individuals and organizations build human-first cultures in an AI-driven world. He's the founder of EnSpirit Global and EnSpirit AI Technologies, from where he delivers transformative coaching, training, and innovative tools. And he has recently published his latest book, Human Edge: Why Self-Leadership Wins in a Tech-Heavy, AI-Driven World. Beiju's work empowers thousands worldwide to take ownership of their journey and lead with purpose. And today we hear more about the ups and downs of his journey. Hi, Baiju. Thank you so much for joining me on the Phoenix Conversations. It's great to have you here.
No, it's great. Thank you so much for inviting me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too, absolutely. So I want to start where I always start, and that is, what were you like as a child? What kind of person were you? What did you expect of life? Did you have something that you wanted to be when you grew up? Tell me about young Baiju.
Well, young Bays, you probably know because growing up in a Indian household, the perception of choice wasn't even there. There wasn't a choice about having a choice. You know, we had this sort of, first generation parents come from East Africa or India, and they come because they want to give their children a better life. But their route to that is always education. So growing up, it was very much make sure you do your homework, get good grades, which I didn't always. I wasn't a straight A student, so there was always this like fear of the report and the exam, getting sort of the scale conversation from your parents, and always comparing yourself. Or so and so did well. So I grew up in a loving household, but always feeling I was never good enough. I always feeling that, well, that's just the way it is, isn't it? That's just what, I just haven't been drawn that card, so it is what it is. I was never angry about it. I was never trying. I wasn't one fighting the system. It was just like, um, just just the way things are. So yes, in terms of that, so I had no actual dreams. And then, it was like the perception of having to be either a doctor or an accountant or an engineer or a, sort of pharmacist, those standard things that an Asian household is. And I wasn't academically that great. And I just fell into, right, I did my levels, didn't get great grades. I went through clearing, for those who may remember that. And I took a maths course, assuming I could do accountancy.
So that's definitely not where you went. So did you ever become an accountant? What was the kind of
Oh.
reinvention that happened at that point then?
Yeah, thinking about it, it's probably the first sort of reinvention. And I remember it was 6 months into that course, I was in the library, and there was a book on the thing, and I picked this book up, and I read it cover to cover. And it was the first book I recall that I read on my own accord, as opposed to for homework or
Wow.
anybody. And I read it, and it was a book on body language by Ellen Peace. People who know is the godfather of body language. And he just talked about how you could tell people's, their communication through gestures. And I was fascinated. I thought, this is really fascinating. I looked at it. It was about psychology. I said, wow. And all of a sudden, I felt this like, this is really interesting. And then I read a couple other books, and I thought, this is what I want to do. So I went to my tutor. I said, look, I want to quit this course. I want to transfer to psychology. There was a few administrative issues where if I didn't finish a course, my parents had to pay fees, so I had to finish a course. So I transferred on to an H&D, did one more year, and then I enrolled on a psychology degree a year later. And I didn't do that. I didn't tell my parents before I did that, which was, I don't know why. It wasn't like a plan. I just sort of just did it. And when I did tell my parents, the first question they asked me was, so what kind of job can you get with psychology degree? And I said, I don't really know. And it devastated them. Oh my God, he's going to spend years doing this degree and end up nowhere. But I loved it. I loved it. And I did my dissertation around sport because I interested in sport, cricket and football, etc. Married. And then when I graduated, spent 6 months, as you do, looking. And I saw this one job in a paper saying psychology lecturer. And the criteria was degree essential, Everything else is desirable. I thought, well, I've got a degree. I applied and I got this part-time position as a psychology lecturer, which turned into a full-time position about 6 months later. And then that was that.
Amazing. So completely different. And were your parents kind of reconciled to that when you got the job?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's right. So what you do is you teach other people that subject. That's the only job. And it was a little bit because although when my parents came over to the UK, and my mum was in a factory, but my dad was a civil servant. But back in India, they were teachers. They were professionally. They were teachers. My mum was a high-end sort of language teacher. Dad was sort of a science teacher type thing. So they appreciated that profession. So for it's a very worthy profession, so respectable, so all the rest of it. And then during that, when I was teaching, it was an FE college. I took a master's in sports psychology because I thought that's what I really want to be, and I did that part time when I was teaching until I graduated about 2 years later.
And so how did you feel about this reinvention when you started doing the degree and then getting the job? Did you feel like a different person had emerged?
I felt like all of a sudden, I've got a choice. And looking back at it, I didn't think it was a reinvention. It was also a normal tapestry of life, if you like. And I sort of lent into it. And I was proud of myself taking my own decisions around that. And the fact that I got a teaching job, and I got married quite young. So I got married while I was teaching, had my first child. And then I wanted to be a sports psychologist. And I thought, yeah, but this was back in early 90s. And even now, sports psychology is a worthy profession. But then, even professional sports people didn't really give it kudos. It was so hard to get into it. So I did it for about a year, and it was just hard. And with a young family, if I was on my own, I might have sort of explored it and gone around the world and did whatever. But with a young family, it was difficult. So then I left my teaching job and got a corporate job. So which was in sales. And I did it with the aim of staying there for only 6, 7 months, then go back to sports psychology. But then the evil money took over, whereby I was earning a lot of money in a short space of time. I thought, you know what? Let me just do it for a couple more years, and then I'll do sports psychology. But when you sort of succumb to that draw money, it went 5 years, and then I thought it's too late to get back into it. So, and it's at that 5 year point in my corporate that I discovered this world of coaching.
That's really interesting. So, in fact, from being a lecturer, you reinvented yourself into a corporate role. So that was another quite quick reinvention in a way, and a new person with a financial goal kind of emerged from that.
As we're talking, Lucy, I thought I've only had one or two reinventions in my life. But talking now, thinking, flipping out, I had about 7 or 8 thinking about it. And you're right, I went from academic to corporate, and it was in a media publishing sales specific area around recruiting international students. This was before the internet. So the only way universities could recruit international students were through advertising in trade magazines and going to exhibitions around the world. At its very basic level, I was selling ad space. But at a very posh level, I used to be an educational consultant for universities who want to recruit students. And thing is, what I didn't know then, I didn't want to be known as a salesman because I was an academic. I had a degree. And what I didn't realize, unknowingly, I went into the market because our target market was universities. So I went in to talk to deans of schools and marketing assistants to recruit students. But I went as I'm an academic. I understand this world. So I didn't sell. And we all know when you don't sell, you sell and building rapport. So I didn't know any of this theory until I started reading about, Jim Rohn and all these sales gurus. I thought, I'm doing something that I didn't realize I was doing. And I got quite successful in that. I was there for 9 years before my next reinvention.
So what happened at the end of the 9 years? Where did you need to go after that?
So what happened was, I remember during that 5 years into that corporate job, coaching started entering the UK world, right? And people, what's this? Well, and this is around 2001 and 2. So I went on this coaching course, and I was fascinated because at the end of this weekend, I realized that all this knowledge around psychology, which is quite a dry subject, I found these practical tools to apply in the real world. So I thought, yeah, I want to be a coach, but I talked a good game for 5 years because the money was good, family was good. I always gave myself an excuse. I'm not good enough, not the right time. Economy's not great, blah, 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 blah. And then the moment happened in 2006. I was in New York closing a big deal. And I remember this deal I earned sort of telephone numbers in terms of commission. It was a massive deal. And this was back in the day before you had WhatsApp and email was only just being invented, is we used to have to fax orders over. So I went to this meeting, got the deal, and then phoned the London office saying, yeah, deal's closed, faxed the order over to London office to prove the deal was signed. And the way the company I was with dealt with commission is it was quite generous. They actually paid commission on order, not on money in. If you earned £1,000 commission, you would get paid 80% of your commission, and they will put 20% in the cancellation fund. So if I earned £1,000 commission on a Monday, and they used to pay weekly by check, it was like whatever. I used to get the commission on a Friday, or 80% of it. So I knew within a couple of weeks of that deal, I'd got a lot of money. And then I remember sitting on the bed in the hotel after I told the London office, and they were like, yeah, well done. Go and spend a few days in New York on us, blah, blah, blah. And I sat on my bed and I felt very pleased with myself, ecstatic, but only for about 4 or 5 seconds. And then I felt empty. Is this it? Is this what my life's about? Yes, I've earned some money. I've earned my boss even more money. Yes, I've got a good deal, but what have I contributed? Is this it? And I really had a moment where I thought, Paige, you've been talking a great game for the last 5 years. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Because I knew that it was important for me to make a decision, because now the company was going to, I knew they were on the horizon. They were going to start offering me a bigger salary, but also more importantly, which would have been even more difficult, like shares and equity. And when you start having shares and equity, and to realize those, you've got to stay a number of years, right? So I remember flying back from New York to London on the plane. I started writing down all the, not excuses, but reasons I wasn't making the move. And they all things that you and me, not good enough, the wrong time of the year. I've got a family, got responsibilities, blah, 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 all these things. And then I'd be honest with myself. I said, right, what's the real, and the real one thing that's really holding me back, because all the others were conjecture and story, was I going to put myself in more financial difficulty? Like, was I going to go jump from the frying pan to the fire? I remember, and this is when like these workshops and seminars were going. I remember I went to one seminar, and this one speaker, and I sort of hold this as well, said to me, because if you're ever thinking about leaving your job to start a business, is yes, absolutely, but if you leave your job without planning some financial cushion, and you don't succeed in the first several months of your business, you're going to back to square one, right? So ask yourself, if you were to leave today, right now, without any planning, how long could you survive with no more income? And then assess your risk profile. So some people will say, actually, no, I could survive for 6 months. That's good enough. For some people, they need 2 years put away. So ask yourself, if it's less than 6 months, you think, and I answered that question before New York, and I thought, 3 or 4 months. And when I come back, I thought, oh, okay. And this is when there was a few people I knew in property, and I realized that worked out how much I needed in my bank account to leave to give me that cushion for 6 months. And then I went into property, did some deals, and within 9 months of that flight back, I was in a position, did some property deals, where I sold this property, bought and sold the property, and enough money in the bank that I left. And I had the resignation letter written already in my pocket. And when that moment arrived, where this sister phoned me and said, we've exchanged, completed, money's been transferred. Again, this is before you couldn't check on the phone your bank account. You had to have someone telling you it was there. And then that was it. I handed my notice in. And then I started my coaching and training business and not looked back.
That's amazing. So actually, that in fact encompasses two reinventions. First, you as a property developer or dealer, whatever it was. So that's one kind of reinvention. But yeah, so then you started your business. So how did that work? How did you reinvent yourself as somebody who had something to sell, had services, products, whatever it was? How did you go out and market yourself?
Well, again, Lucy, it was just throwing myself in, didn't know what to do. And I went to this one coaching course, a gentleman called John Boys, you might know him. And he said, oh, you need to join, this thing called Academy, right? Run
Yeah.
by Thomas Penny Power. I went, what's that? He goes, oh, networking. I said, networking, what, computer wires? He goes, no, 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 no. You go and think. And I remember my first event was in December 2007. There was a big networking event. And someone we probably know, Nigel Risner, who was a speaker there. And I went to this event, and it was like 300 people there, all small business owners, doing what they do. And there was a moment where Nigel said, right, everybody stand up. It's the end of the year. We're gonna set yourself up for next year, and grab the 5 closest people next to you. So grab the 5 closest people. So you have a group of 6. So this is your mastermind group for the next year, accountability group. And in my group was Thomas Power, who's the For those who know, who was the founder, chairman of Academy there, along with his wife Penny Power. And that started my journey of understanding how to sort of grow a business through, networking. And obviously they had their first social network. And then we met in January 2008. And I will never forget. And I told Thomas this. He said, like, just be yourself. He looked at my website, which I did then, and it looked like some sort of corporate, massive conglomerate. It's only me doing some coaching, right? He goes, stop it. He goes, just be yourself, connect with people, be interested in people, and then just do what you do. So I've got a few coaches, did a bit of BNI, then you just do what you do. And because my background was in sales and in teaching, I positioned myself as a sales coach in business. And then I went to the local authority and said, look, I used to be a lecturer. I can teach, I can coach teachers. And I just happened to be very lucky that there was a program that they were coaching aspiring heads. So I got that gig.
Oh, that's a very kind of that's a big reinvention. And
Um,
how long did that take you to really take off and feel secure? Were you still feeling that kind of background questioning of, am I good enough? Can I make this work? Am I going to be able to support my family?
Between you and me, I still do to a certain extent. And I think the first 5 years, I was on a bit of oh, do you know what? I've got a gig. That's great. I'm all right for a few months. And I didn't invest in my business the way I should have done. And I think there's a little bit about, as long as I'd got enough to pay the mortgage and the bills, that's fine. As opposed to, do you know what? Let's speculate, invest in the business. For the first 5 years, it was probably a business that lasted 5 years, but still 1 years old because it wasn't much evolution. And I think the turning point was probably how I met you, is when I joined the KPA program and sort of understand how to position your pitch and publish a book. And then I got my own first book out. And then I started running my own accelerator, which I did, got the book out there, getting more speaking gigs. And then that sort of reinvention occurred. And it was really going really well up to lockdown. And then, because I had accelerators, I had programs, of books, and obviously lockdown happened. And on one level, it was good because it sort of gave me a reset. But I'll, I don't know if you remember during lockdown, there's this thing called Clubhouse, and I was quite active on Clubhouse where we sort of talked to other entrepreneurs. And that sort of took me onto a pivot whereby when lockdown stopped and we came into the real world, because I was quite vocal on there, I got different corporate gigs. So that it went back sort of 10 years where I was getting these corporate gigs, which was great. I tried to relaunch my accelerator, it wasn't happening. And then I lost my mojo. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? And it's only about 2-3 years ago when I started writing this next book, Humanity's Edge, that I'm coming back into it. So when you sort of invited me on this podcast, I thought, oh, you want to talk about my recent sort of reincarnation of where I'm at to 55, looking at my business. Are there things that I'm proud of in my business? Absolutely. Are there things that I feel like I've not achieved that I should have? Yes. And there's probably the underlying emotion, which I'm not proud of, is shame. I'm shamed that I haven't achieved certain things. And from the outside, it probably looks like it's really great. And yeah, things are good, things are great, but probably not as great as I want them to be. Even now, I feel like I'm entering a season of my life that, with what's available to us now, is I couldn't achieve before. So I'm very excited about things, but also still, I feel as much energy as I did at 35, because one life event during that I forgot to mention was my divorce, which had a massive impact as well.
That's really interesting that you mentioned shame, and I'm sure that must somehow go back to what you said about your childhood and needing to achieve and be good enough for your parents, and almost to sort of justify their move to the UK. Almost, it runs very deep, doesn't it? Talk to me about your divorce, your personal life, and what happened. It's always another massive reinvention. If a big relationship ends, you come out of it needing to be a different person.
100%. So lockdown occurred 2020. My divorce, that sort of started around 2013, 2014, where she turned around and said, look, you don't want this. And it's probably a year, 2 years where it was me trying to save the marriage, forcing it and all the rest of it. And I learned a lot about, um, I made it about me, how I could fix it. And what I didn't realize, which I do now, is, well, she was on her journey. She was in trauma. She was in pain. I didn't look at the marriage from her point of view until later on afterwards. We're friends now, and it's better. So that made me go through a massive identity crisis, because all of a sudden I said to myself, I'm this so-called psychologist, changing people's worlds, whether it's business or life. And then my own world is a bit of a show, right? And where's the authenticity there? How can you claim to cue other people when you've got this going on? So I went through a massive identity crisis around that. And once I came out the divorce and we came from out of it where we've sorted it, is now I'm this new person. I wasn't necessarily overweight, but I wasn't necessarily healthy. And I thought, do you know what? What's the thing? And we talk about things that we can control, Lucy, in business and life, right? So in business, we can control our product, what we create. We can control how much communication out in the marketplace. We can control the market, all the rest of it. And we could do everything and still someone not buys our product or service. So we're not in control of that. But we also know there's certain strategies and methodologies to maximize someone saying yes. So I get that. But there was something I said, what's the thing I have zero need for anybody else to have any say in it? And I thought, my own health. I can choose what I put in my mouth and I can choose how much I move. And I have complete control over that. So I went on this journey where I'm going to just get fitter, and I lost 20 kilos, did a big photo shoot, and it transformed everything. Because anybody who's done any sort of physical transformation, it's not just about the body healing and changing, is your mind has to be in a certain place, and it has a knock-on effect on everything. The way all of a sudden people saw me, the way I attracted different opportunities. It wasn't a business strategy, but by doing that transformation, my business improved, my relationships improved with myself and with others. And it was very, very transformational. And I've since then, I'm very proud I've kept up the fitness regime and all the rest of it to the extent where my whole identity shifted. Because like, habits at a surface level can last for a certain time. But if your identity doesn't shift, the actions can move. So for example, if you don't identify as a gym goer, if you say, well, I just go to the gym when I've got time, your identity is someone who's looking to avoid, find excuses, I do it not to feel guilty. Whereas if you say, well, no, it's part of what I do. It's like brushing my teeth, I just go to the gym. Your identity changes. It's like, you in terms of when I write my book, is when you write a book, you're an author. There's an authority around that. So that was sort of the biggest, most significant change for me when I went for the divorce and lost my weight. And it was all about what I could control in my own self-image.
That's such an interesting way to look at it. As somebody who's also lost a lot of weight recently, I can completely identify with what you're saying. It changes everything, and it changes your mindset as much as your body. So let's go back and talk about the reinvention of becoming an author. So you wrote your first books. I know this because we published them at Rethink Press. So tell me about writing your first book and how that kind of changed your perception of yourself.
Well, the book that I wrote with you guys, Change Your Game, was technically my third book. My first book was like a sort of 40-page ebook about networking. My second book, which was self-published, was called I'm an Entrepreneur, Get Me Out of It. And all it was basically, I interviewed a bunch of entrepreneurs, and the book was a transcription of the interview. And so I had this book where I'm talking to someone, they were talking to me, transcribed it, and that was that. And I sort of self-published that. And then the book I did with you was Change Your Game and Play Your Game, which was my first, where I would call my IP, my thing. But I remember I was in a car park of Tesco's, and I came up with this idea of the 101 ways to unleash your entrepreneurial spirit. And I messaged, I said, look, I've got this great idea about a book, 101 Ways, and I sent it to you. And you were very diplomatic and you're very kind. You went, this is very good, Baiju. I can see where you're going, but maybe ask yourself, who is this for, and what are you really trying to achieve? Basically, just saying to me, I get it, but this ain't going to wash as a book. And I remember these 101 ways. I sort of wrote more about it, and then Joe, your business partner, I spoke to him. He sort of looked at it and he goes, "Babe, do you know what? You keep talking with me about mindset, but also you talk about strategy. But then you go to another course about taking action, being accountable. But if you haven't got the right strategy and the right mindset, you're not going to achieve. So you always talk about the three things." And when he looked at my 101, he goes, each of your 101 ways fits into one of these three criteria. It's like your mindset, your strategy, and this. And then I created yes, the way you change your world and your game, because I was into sport, was this three. And that was the invention of the book of Change Your Game. And I remember Joe said to me, because your book doesn't fall into like 4 or 5 chapters. It falls into these 3 things, but within the 3 things is this. And I remember him saying to me, I don't know if you say, we had to create a new template in Rethink that adjusted yours, and we use that for other books as well. So I was quite proud of that.
I'm so glad that we managed to create the book with you, so that you had more books in that series. But now
This was published by Wiley because I wanted to get a traditional publisher. We called it Humanity's Edge. We called in this world of AI, and as we know now, we're living in the world recording this video, in 2026, where AI impacts everything. And there's there's people that fall into this is the best thing since sliced bread, and then or you fall into, do you know what, this is the end of humanity as we see it. But my premise is this: is that AI will bring humanity back together, because AI now does a lot of the heavy lifting. So, for example, 10 years ago, if I said to you, Lucy, oh, have you got 10 minutes? Oh, no, I'm busy today because I've got to do this report or write or something. But we know there's tools now that can do a lot of the heavy lifting. We are needed to give it context, prompts, etc. So the labor that we as humans had to endure that took up time is no longer not necessarily there. So as we start to use AI more properly, I think, what are we left to do? We are left to what I call get around the campfire, to communicate, to strategize, to brainstorm, to get creative, which, if you think of what humanity's edge is, which is the book about, is how we lead, how we create, how we hold each other accountable, how we unleash each other's potential, and not get succumbed to being defined by labor as an individual. So what Humanity's Edge is about is the way we grow high performing teams is all about the essence of humanity. When the culture's right in a team, it's not the system. The systems and processes and all those actually are the scaffold. But what makes it come alive is the culture of the nuance of the individual. And that's what the book is about.
and it's published quite recently, hasn't it?
It has. Well, as we speak now, it's on Amazon now, but as we speak now, it's in a couple of days' time. But by the time this recording comes out, it will be on Amazon.
Congratulations. I recommend it to everybody because I have actually read it, and it's terrific.
Yes, thank you for your endorsement. Yes.
And do you feel that this book has kind of reinvented you in a way, because it's a different kind of publisher, it's a different sort of profile? Do you feel that, you've been an author for some time, but do you feel that this book has been part of another reinvention for you?
Yeah, 100%. I think the other 2 books were very much about the sort of startup solo entrepreneur space, about, getting started, getting out of the sort of rut where you are, and different tactics. But this is very much of its time, where positioning myself as someone who's a leadership psychologist to go out there to say, look, your teams and your companies will grow not because of the tools, but because how you show up as leaders. And if you don't deal with that, the tools will exaggerate the disruption. The tools will exaggerate the weaknesses in your company if you don't deal with the people. So this is definitely the position where I want to take myself, whereby it's working with individuals and teams to say, look, your edge as a human is your differentiator, because everybody has got access to all these tools. So in terms of producing stuff, there's a fairly even playing field. But what elevates you is your humanity.
So finally, Baiju, if there's somebody out there listening who is standing on the edge of change, knows change is coming, whether they've chosen it or not, whether they need to reinvent themselves or being pushed into something, what is one piece of advice you would give them to take this next stage forwards?
As we all know, change is the constant. That is inevitable, whether it's put upon us or whether we choose a change in a business or relationship otherwise. So if someone's at the precipice of saying, well, I'm at this crossroad of change, you say there's one bit of advice, but it's probably several levels of one piece of advice. Number one is trust your gut. Trust your instinct about what is. You might not like it. You might not know the how. And I always talk about focus on the why it's happening and what you want to create, and let go of the how it may happen and when. Because the how and the when will be determined by your why and your what. So at the point of change, you say, okay, trust yourself, and then be intentional in terms of your energy. So pick up the phone and have the conversation. Be vulnerable to your peers. Be expressive, but also don't Don't give yourself the time scale of the achievement, but give yourself the time scale around doing certain actions, but detaching yourself from outcomes. So you might say, well, you need 3 weeks and then you should be all right. No, but you might say, in 1 week, I will ring this person. I will post that blog. The return might come later, but you can show up intentionally in different ways, but also be kind to yourself.
That's lovely advice. Thank you so much. Thank you, Baiju Solanki, for having been in this Phoenix conversation. I found it genuinely fascinating, and I really appreciate you talking to us like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Really enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully people will find great value from this and inspiration.
Baiju, thank you again so much for sharing your journey and your reinventions. I love these conversations where my guests think they don't have much to share in the way of reinventions, and then they dig deep and realize they have more points of renewal and significant turning points than they realized. And for more inspiring reinvention stories, follow and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on Substack, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. My unspellable and unpronounceable name means that I am the only Lucy Makara on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.